I can do all things through him who strengthens me. This verse is often used in sporting events. It's used for a great achievement, maybe for wealth building. Pick something. But people use this as if it's a tool, a mantra, if you like, to achieve whatever goals and dreams they happen to have. And this is not what this verse means. In fact, the meaning here is really quite rich. But to understand it, we need to dig in a little bit to some of the Greco-Roman culture to understand it. And in this video, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to look at the text in the Greek and in the English. We're going to sort of break down what this is getting at and why Paul actually doesn't thank the Philippians for the gift that they give him, even though that's the reason that he's writing the letter. Of course, the church in Philippi sent to Paul a gift a number of times. And in this letter of Paul to the Philippians, he's writing to address this, to respond to their gift giving, their generosity. But when he does so, it's really curious that he actually doesn't thank the Philippians for the gift that they give him. In this video, we're going to find out why. So let's jump over into the text and we'll get into more details.
So you can see here we are in Philippians chapter 4, and here's a verse that we're looking at here. I am all things, I am strong enough, or I'm able to do all things by the one who strengthens me, or in the one who strengthens me. And you can see here, the Legacy Standard Bible, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. And this is kind of interesting, right? So let's talk through this briefly and sort of discuss this. And what I want to sort of show here is that we want to go back and look at the context a little bit to get a bit of an understanding of how this is actually working here. Notice back here when we come to verse 10 here, he says, I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at last you have revived thinking about me. Indeed, you were thinking about me before, but lacked opportunity. And notice here that Paul, even though this letter, most commentators argue that Paul wrote Philippians to respond to the gift that the Philippians gave him, notice that Paul's not thanking them for the gift. He doesn't say thank you. Now, some people flippantly looking at this text will say, well, this is Paul saying thanks for the gift. But he's very careful, I think, not to say thank you for the gift here. And there's a good reason for this, because in Paul's time, in the Greco-Roman culture, when somebody did something for you, there was an expectation that you would have an obligation, if you like, to return that favor to some extent. There are three things effectively, three kinds of obligations that you would be expected to incur if somebody gave to you a gift like this. You would obviously start by thanking them directly, which Paul doesn't do here, as I mentioned, but you'd also seek opportunities to return the favor as well. And again, Paul doesn't seek to do that here at all. In fact, he seems to go out of his way to almost say he's not going to do anything. And then thirdly, he would publicly express the generosity and honor of the one who gave him this gift. And this whole thing is called patronage. And there's a client-patron relationship between the one who gives, which is the patron, and the one who receives, which is the client. And so by giving this gift, I think what's going on here is that the Philippians, having wanted to have Paul think of them as his patron. So that means then that he is obligated to express thanks to them, return the favor in some way, in a way that is unique to his capabilities and whatnot, and also express the grace and generosity and honor of the patron. So then Paul would go about talking about just how wonderful the Philippian church was. In fact, as we think about the Greek words for grace, charis, and for faithfulness, pistos, these words are rooted in this patronage kind of idea. The one who is showing favor is showing what we would translate the word as grace, charis. The one who is receiving the gift, the client, is expected then to be faithful, if you like, to return the favor and to demonstrate faithfulness to the client, or to the patron rather, in order to sort of be regarded as a good patron. So really the ideas of favor and grace extend to the client, and then the client in return shows loyalty or faithfulness back to the patron. So in this letter, the Philippians might expect Paul to express thanks to them and then explain the response, how he is going to seek their favor in return. And possibly that may have meant that he was actually going to spend a significant amount of time, maybe even pastoring the church at Philippi. But that's not what he does here at all. In fact, it seems that Paul is trying to avoid thanking them at all for the work that he has done here. And he goes on here, in fact, this is really interesting, not that I speak from lack, not that according to lack that I speak. I mean, we can just do it from English here, couldn't we? Not that I speak from want, for I have learnt to be content in whatever circumstances I'm in. And the wording here is the idea of self-sufficiency, not in a, pride and arrogant kind of sense, not in a way that he's, I don't need anything, but in the sense that he has what he needs, right? He doesn't need anything external to himself to be able to fulfill the whatever it is that he's talking about, which we're going to come to now. For I know, and he goes on to explain, it doesn't really matter my circumstances. I can have a lot, I can have a little. It doesn't actually affect me in that, it really is just a matter of learning how to do this, how to manage in those cases. And then he goes on in verse 13 to say, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. And one of the big studies that we need to do when we think about the words all in Greek is often it's capped by something. Now, Paul clearly here is not talking about all things full stop and, that's the end of the story because he can't fly. There's things that he can't do even though he has, Christ in him, so to speak. So Paul's focus here, as he's thinking about the gift from the Philippians, is really bound up with this idea of patronage. And this is important. Paul doesn't say here, I have everything I need. He's not talking about what he has. He's saying, I'm able to do all things. I am sufficient to do all things. That's what he's getting at here. So this is really about his ability, not about what he has. So he's not talking about the gift and the benefit of the gift. He's talking about his ability to do something. Well, what is that? Well, we find that in Philippians chapter 3, verse 12, where Paul says, not that I've already obtained it or have already become perfect, but I press on so that I may lay hold of that for which also I was laid hold of by Christ Jesus. And here you have this passive verb here, which is saying that Christ laid hold of him. He was laid hold of, so Christ did something to him. And that then is what he focuses on. This now is his focus. Now, this is really significant, even within the idea of patronage, because the idea of patronage really means that Paul already has an obligation. He has a patron of a higher order than the Philippians that supersedes any obligations that he might, incur as a result of gifts that people like, or churches like the Philippians give him. So how does all of this work? Well, back in Greco-Roman times, again, if you were a patron and you wanted to get the favor of a higher patron, you could actually provide a service for that higher patron by providing them with lower connections that would be beneficial to them. And I think this is actually what's going on here. We have Christ, if you like, as a patron, but he's a client of a higher patron, namely the Father. And so Paul becomes a client of Christ, which is what we have here in chapter 3, verse 12. And then Christ himself is a patron of God. And so then what we have is that Christ has functioned to introduce Paul and you and I as believers to the Father as a mediating patron. Now, this is just one of many models, if you like, that we get of Christ as a mediator. But this is a really interesting one, and I think has a significant role to play here in chapter 4 that we were looking at just before. So here I can do all things by the one who strengthens me, or through the one who strengthens me. And so here's the thing. If that mediating patron wants to ensure that his services to that ultimate patron are of the highest value, they are going to ensure that the activities of that lower client is actually up to par, if you like, is going to actually do what the higher patron is going to need for service, to be favored, to show the favor back down to the mediating patron here. And so this is why I think we have the one who strengthens me, namely Christ, as being here this core piece of this. Because here, Christ, as part of the new covenant, is not only sort of saying to us, okay, you can become my client and I'll be your patron, but he's ensuring that the work that we do on behalf of his patron is up to scratch. And this goes back to what we see in Ezekiel chapter 36 verse 27. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes so that you'll be careful to do my judgment. So here I think what Christ is doing is he's working in Paul to ensure that Paul and his ministry is sufficient for the ministry that he's asking him to do for that ultimate patron, namely God. And so Paul here is saying, I don't need the gifts that you give me because I have a higher patron, and he has taught me, if you like, how to get along in humble means and so on, and in abundance. And because of this, I can do all things that are necessary for that ultimate patron because I have that other patron in me, strengthening me regardless of my circumstances. Now, this doesn't mean to say that Paul is disregarding the gift of the Philippians at all. No, this is very carefully worded. Look at what he says here. I rejoiced in the Lord greatly. Why? Why? Because down here in verse 14, you have done well to fellowship with me in my affliction. You are showing your love for God, your love for Christ, and your desire to partner with the Lord in ministry. And all of that is a cause for me to rejoice greatly because you are growing and you are showing that same loyalty to our master patron, if you like, that I too am showing. But I don't need your gift to do this. I've learned that I can do all things regardless of my circumstances because that's what Christ is in me to strengthen me to do.
So the point of this verse is not to say that you can do whatever you want to do, create all these wonderful things and achieve all these outcomes that you're aiming for because of Christ who is in you. No, the goal here is not on what you have, it's on what you do. And the argument here that Paul is making is that all things that God requires of us are possible for us to do because Christ is in you to strengthen you so that you can achieve the things that God calls you to achieve. You can do the things that he calls you to do. And this is actually hugely encouraging because we may not be winning all the time. The point is not, are we winning? The point is, am I faithful? Paul could be faithful whether he was in humble circumstances or whether he was in abundance. And so for you and I, the question is not so much, can I do this? The question is, can I be faithful? Can I remain faithful to my patron to enact and do the things that he calls me to do? And as we look through the New Testament, what he calls us to do is to live, to put Christ first, to be obedient, to love the Lord with all our God. And yeah, all of these things are hard, but not because of the things external to us. They're hard because of our own internal nature. And that's why we have the indwelling Holy Spirit to make us or to cause us to walk according to his statutes and to cause us to walk in his commandments. And so that's the key benefit of the new covenant, having Christ in you for that very reason. Recently, I actually preached a sermon on this passage, and if you're interested in getting a copy of my sermon notes, I write my notes out in full so I can repeat them reasonably easily. You can actually go to bma.to/phil4. You'll find the link. Well, here it is here. And you can actually get a copy of my sermon notes and a link to the video form of that sermon as well, if you're interested. So bma.to/phil4 for that. And that gives you a lot more detail about patronage, how it works, and the application of this passage to our lives today. So bma.to/phil4. Finally, before I finish up, if you have found this helpful, this video, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more content like this, and go down below into the comment section and leave an emoji of your choice in the comment section below. I'll know that you got to this part just because you left an emoji rather than just a comment. Or you could leave a comment and an emoji. But let me know, leave a comment, leave an emoji in the comment section below. I look forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next video. We'll see you then.